Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. In my continuing series on pioneers of consciousness machines, radionic machines as they're often called, is the famous Dr. Ruth Drown, whose middle name is Bamer. Bamer. Okay, she was born in October 21st, on October 1st, 1891, and died in 1965, March 13th. So she lived to be what would be considered the average age people lived at that time, which was in the middle 70s at that time, which now is up to 78 to 80. And this is average life expectancy. That means the average person based in the Western world. This figure is kind of skewed because that, again, is an average. Many people have been, throughout the ages, living to be 85 and now into their early 90s. So this is important to understand. So she did do that, but there was also talk that when she was in prison, that they injected her, and it's convenient that she never made it to trial. So there's all sorts of information that you don't hear very well, much of. So we do need to keep all of that into consideration, and this is a mirrored, dirty case. Since it happened in the United States, and it happened in 1965, in the early 60s, we can trace it somewhat. But we have to remember, and this is what skews everything in life, the horrible level of corruption that has been involved in the human race since caveman days. And there certainly isn't any difference back in 1965, and Los Angeles has always been, as almost everywhere, I don't know if they're exclusive, a very dirty city with dirty politics and corrupt police and everything else. And of course, that goes all around the city. Is New York any better? Well, I don't think so. You ever heard of Serpico and all the corruption there? Chicago, known for its gangsters, which never convicted any of their top gangsters. They had to get them on tax fraud. So Al Capone was arrested by the tax agency. Not a single judge, police officer, or individual would testify against Al Capone in Chicago. Who ran that city? And you think it stopped there with whatever crime? And you've got to remember that organized crime is not involved in just and street robberies and just prostitutions and porno and other things they used to be involved in. They go into legitimate businesses. They go where the money is and they extort them as they do today. As I have personally seen and alleged, companies like Costco, Trader Joe's, Walmart are all under the control of criminals that are assisted by law enforcement. And this is important to preface this all with, because what are these stories? But we do have, quote, documentations, things written by specific people seeking their own prejudiced viewpoints as politicians, educators that know everything, yet we have nothing. So it's very hard to judge what the facts of anything are. Nobody is seeking truth. People are seeking to pad their own pockets, to get patted on their back by their colleagues so they can survive within the system they're involved in. Now, Ruth Drown was one of the major people who took over from Albert Abrams. Apparently, it's hard to find the things, and I'm not going to go into long I could spike 5 or 6 hours on Ruth Drown and not probably cover everything. Not only her theories, her belief systems, she was very metaphysical, which of course wouldn't she be? She's using consciousness instruments, otherwise known as radionics, which apparently is a term she pushed, thinking that these were some sort of radio waves. She wrote several books. She was very successful and trained and licensed chiropractic. So it's important that everyone understands of who this person was. She also has an interesting background of learning electronics and apparently worked for electronics. I'm not going to go into all this stuff, but she does have a background not only of training in chiropractics, working with Albert Abrams and others, she also had some electronic background. And I was trying to find more information on that, but I mean, this is the problem out there, people. If you want people to do extensive research, we need money to do that. And while we have all this, we need to have people sit down and be able to spend hours and hours every day reading, seeking out sources to get to the bottom of all this. To find out what ultimately the truth is, to investigate their technologies and make it into a higher level, more effective tool. We believe in her technology, we understand radionics and how it works, and it is a science and can be made into that and be effective. After all, the so-called common healing modalities that we have done by medical accredited doctors, licensed doctors, is pretty pathetic and fails terribly. They're nothing more than pill writers, and if the pills don't work for you and you survive the pills, maybe you're okay. So there certainly is a place for patent medicine, but that should be only part of our treatments. So there should be other things, and all medications are based on for the treatment of symptoms of whatever. They never state for the cure of. Now that's a pretty bad way to do anything to begin with. So remember that's how drugs are put out there. And if you look at the inserts you get in drugs and everything else, there's always a huge amount of side effects. A certain percentage of people die from anything giving them. While this may be tiny, it's still an effect. Other ones have all sorts of side effects. But if you're suffering from a horrible, horrible problem, you need to stop those symptoms, meaning if your blood pressure is through the roof, if you can't breathe because of asthma, well, taking a little pill to help that is something that will save your life and something I've always been in favor of and have used myself as needed. So many natural things, because of suppressions and other problems, don't work that well. Yet they do, and many times work, and are better for long-term cures than it is for the handling of symptoms, which could be deadly. So there's certainly a place for all that. But when it becomes a place unto itself, we have all sorts of problems. So we need to make sure that that is should be handled properly. But we haven't. Like everything that goes into goes into the public, it becomes horribly, horribly corrupt and becomes foul. So whatever regular medical science could offer us was corrupted by these companies, their money, and the criminals that run everything. So with that basis, everybody should know. Now, there is, so since it was in the 60s here, we have court cases, we have statements from people supposedly that tested her. There is actual investigative information by the people, by the Los Angeles County, who actually went after Ruth Drown to prosecute her and her technology. So this is very, very interesting. It's very interesting that we have this information. Now, as I said, how good is it? How much was she set up? How much was she threatened? Doctors do this all the time, and I saw this in Dr. Heaven, where I used to live, called the Coachella Valley, which is mostly known for Palm Springs and its copious quantity of old, stupid people, that if somebody came up that had a different treatment, that they were persecuted by the doctors there, who lived in giant mansions and made millions of dollars a year off of stupid, dying old people. Never really helping them, but giving them the best medical care that the graveyard could provide. So you got to remember there's all these factors going on, and that there were many cases. But we have two very shocking cases of investigations into Drown. I believe she was a real credible person. She's not a person out there, a quote gypsy trying to steal from people, conning you. She believed in her equipment, but that doesn't mean anything. I would assume, is she irrational? Is she cashing her checks, saying how wonderful these checks are, that people are being helped when they're not? Is there a mountain of records proving she healed so many people? And this is one of the problems, and Albert Abrams didn't have this as well. Neither did anybody else that I can find at this point of saying, well, I treated 50 people this month. Of those 50 people, 40 were cured outright. 3 were not, etc. 3 are still being treated, whatever it is. There doesn't seem to be these kind of standard records, or they were destroyed or whatever. We can't believe anybody on either side. You have the people who are trying to, which I believe in with good intentions, Delaware, Abrams, etc. Abrams was wealthy, but he didn't really give a lot of his equipment away. He didn't set up programs and made it easy for doctors to get. His fees were pretty high, particularly for the time there. And so apparently were the fees Drown charged and everything else. It's interesting that so long ago that the cost of things were generally so high. I will go into her books, her philosophies, her metaphysical understanding in other lectures. This is a big subject, people, and I have no intentions of making sound bites for the idiot stooges out there that don't want to listen for more than 5 minutes because Green Acres is on the TV. Is Zorro on? Did I miss the commercial with the big-butted girl? Well, we're not going to get into that kind of ridiculousness. We'll try. I will give a proper covering here because this is very important. We have a lot of data on her, which we don't really have on Abrams and other peoples because of the age of theirs. And because George Delaware was a Brit, well, there's an awful lot of information he has, but we have to go through all his records as well. And of course, here again, this costs time and money, and who's going to pay for it? That's why it's so important to support us on Patreon, join All Access membership, all the things that are very important that you keep the only pure source of information, probably on this planet, by the way, is IGOS. And of course, they are trying to stop us right now. So the whole idea is that this is all part of what's going on and part of the bigger picture to eliminate all Gnostic truth talk out there. So all of this needs to be fully understood, and we have to go back to that. And we have to also understand that Los Angeles County, even though people somehow think it's Hollywood, and Hollywood is good, Hollywood is not corrupt. Well, the point is that everybody is corrupt, as I've mentioned. Certainly all cities, state and local governments are. It doesn't matter where they are, whom they are, they're all corrupt. So what do you do? And as I said, there's been movies made about Los Angeles corruption. One of them is called Chinatown. Everybody should watch that. I don't know if people think that was a fiction. That was based on true life. The Hat Squad, where the police murdered organized crime and took over their business and put the money in their own pockets. And we go on with these types of LA Confidential. Where the Los Angeles Police Department had tunnels underneath their buildings to smuggle alcohol. It goes on and on of how this goes. And as I said, it's not very unique. And Los Angeles has always had horrible corruption. I don't think it's any different than any other time. There are books out there right now, and they're modern things that Chief Gates of Los Angeles had running these things, even had spies and agents in Russia. I mean, this is the kind of money the police department has, and they're not enforcing the laws. So we have all these types of problems going on, but as he said, they're not any more unique than anything else. But we do have to understand that's the climate that Ruth Drown is living under. And this entire time, and the people there, it's even interesting that the very allegedly corrupt family of General George S. Patton, that his father was an attorney, a district attorney for Los Angeles. So we can understand how corrupt that was, considering how corrupt General George S. Patton himself was, the alleged Nazi and Muslim and American traitor who loved the enemy. So these are all the things you don't get. This is all mixed in, and it's not really off the subject. I'm putting the groundwork. We're putting the soil, and we'll see what kind of seeds grow from this soil. So, but, the case of Ruth Drown is very interesting, as I said, because we have some really strong statements from people, and we just don't know who they are. The other thing is was Ruth Drown ever went in there, and there is the you better fail attitude. Was she approached by the criminal organizations who told her that you better make sure you do everything wrong. If you prove yourself and you bust open the medical industry, well, we're going to bust you open, meaning we're going to kill you and your family. This is what happens, and this happens right up to this day. There's no place to go to. There's no one that's going to help you because all the law enforcement are all part of the game, whether federal, state, or local. Well, that's the way it works. So she did this. She had a background. She did train in this. She wrote books. She made many instruments. And as I said, she had a electrical background. I can't find that article right now, but apparently she worked for major electrical manufacturers for a period of time as a person to do that. So she had this entire background that you don't hear much about. People just think she's this chiropractic and that she learned from Abrams and that was it. Well, that's a very skewed way of looking at things. It's really not true at all. She has this large history of what she did, and it's, as I said, it's difficult to find. I had an article on this many, many years ago, and it actually, I can't seem to find it right now. But here it is. So apparently, I don't know who brought her to the attention of local authorities, but apparently she was in 1963, where the actual California State Department of Public Health went in there and tested her to find out what was going on, okay, and find out what she was doing. I think she was a major threat to the medical industry, as the little article here talks about, and saying that when they did go in and harass her and confiscate her equipment, that she had hundreds and hundreds of these boxes. Now, I don't know if she was treating people, because you need one box per person, so it's easy for a popular doctor to need a couple of hundred. Did she have more than that? Apparently, she sold these boxes all the time, but this is very typical of chiropractors in general, who are always pushing stuff on you. Today, instead of having you buy a little black box, as is stated in this article, they feed you up with $100 or $2 worth of supplements, like you need that junk at high prices. So this is not unusual to a large extent, but apparently she was selling a lot of these, and it's very interesting that, and of course she was Los Angeles based, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad in terms of people going to her, but she must have somehow got a reputation. The whole idea is she had all this stuff, she was functioning. It's unknown how much money she was really making. It would be nice to see all this. How much money was she actually making? Because apparently her costs of doing things, from what I can see, are pretty high. And so were the cost of her boxes back in 1965. Or 63 when this article was written. But so the local health department went in there, checked her out. She also was checked out by the University of Chicago at the urging of supporters of that university who were helped by Drown and wanted the university to investigate her and prove that she was right. Now, the problem with all this is why would you possibly be tested? Why would you do any of this if you couldn't prove yourself? Are you that delusional? So I really wonder about this. I don't think she was delusional to a degree. I think everybody is and thinks that what they have is wonderful. And I've ran into this with a lot of people. And the problem with this is that you're delusional because you survive off of it. So if someone criticizes your equipment or something, well, it's only their fault. Everybody else has helped. Well, there is a truth to that. And since this, like every technology out there, some things work better for you than others. I mean, some people take medications, and it can be as simple as an antibiotic, and it kills them. While 10,000 other people take that antibiotic, and nothing happens. There are horrible potentials to everything. There are a percentage of everything that will kill you. And there is another percentage where it just doesn't work. Another percentage where you just have odd side effects which may not be life endangering. So this is part of it. There's nothing in life that's 100%. Go to the graveyards and look what the doctors have told all those people. Well, they're all dead. And this goes with a lot of things. It works, it doesn't work. This technology works. Our junkyards and landfills are full of junk technology that doesn't work. And I would say at least 30% of the products produced in this time now don't work, or only work for a short period of time and then break, and they probably didn't work too good in that short period of time. So we need to understand that. And we're getting into these that are user dependent as well. Makes it even more complicated. The other thing is that everybody is different. When you try and go in and help someone, you're dealing with their own unique chemical, psychic, and biological makeup. So we're all hoping that things work for the masses better. But a lot of things you have to refine, and most people can't do that. That's why they go to experts. That's what the world is all about. Let's go into her case, which is very blatant if these records are correct. And we don't know. And again, if someone wants to donate several $1,000s for us to check the Los Angeles records out and to go down there and find out how true all this is, go online to do that. Well, we're happy to do that and have researchers waiting. But let's go with the general story here. And of course, there are legal cases connected to this. And so forth. But, all these things don't necessarily, as a lot of people, they think about the strong arm of the law. But, these people are harassed to a degree, but, they don't pay that big of a price. She did, ultimately, and we don't know what goes on behind the scenes because, as I said, there's so much going on. But here we go into the story of Ruth Drown and the Los Angeles Health Department's investigation of her. So it says here that Mrs. Jackie Metcalf, a 22-year-old Torrance, California housewife, mounted the steps of a one-story white building on La Brea Avenue in Los Angeles and entered a door marked Dr. Ruth Drown. La Brea is a big avenue, very well known in Los Angeles. Chiropractic. Inside, she gave 3 small pieces of blotting paper to Dr. Drown and her daughter, Dr. Cynthia Chatfield, also a chiropractor. The stains on the blotters were blood samples from her 3 children. She asked to have her children's ills diagnosed from the blood samples and paid $50 for each diagnostic procedure. Now, $50 in 1963 seems to be very high. That could be as high as $500 today. It costs to go to the average doctor now, I'm not sure, $50, $75 in this time. So it seems like a lot of money, but let's not quibble over that. I'm just making comments. It is kind of interesting. In a few days, you heard from Dr. Chatfield that the analysis of the blood sample shows the youngsters to be coming down with. I'm not sure what that means. So the youngsters to be coming, is that proper English? I'm not a big English person. To be coming down with, or would be coming down with, that's probably wrong. My grammar's not too great, with chicken pox and the mumps, which is quite common. Most people got chicken pox and the mumps as children. Well, this could have been a real situation there. So that's not all that unusual. Everybody has gotten vaccinations that do absolutely nothing. They still come down with all the diseases like I did. I had them all injected in me, which I believe caused all sorts of problems, but I still got all of the diseases. On an earlier visit, Miss Medcat had purchased from the doctor a little black box. I don't know about this. On an earlier visit. Well, that's interesting. This wasn't her first visit. Well, I guess she had to be told to bring blood samples in. A $588 Drown therapeutic instrument to treat herself and her family at home. Dr. Chatfield told her how to set the dials on the machine to cure the children. So she gave them the rates, and this person bought the box for what we can round up to $600, which is quite a bit of money back then. Probably equivalent to a couple of $1,000s today. I think people, $600, well, that may have been a monthly salary back in 1965 for the average person. I'm not really sure. So that's quite a chunk of change there. Mrs. Metcalf, however, was not just another patient. She was an undercover agent for the California State Department of Public Health. all three of her children were not ill. Well, they didn't say they were ill, first of all. They said they were coming down with that. Okay? So they would possibly become ill, and these were in their systems. And of course, this is called preventative medicine, something that doctors used to laugh at. So we don't know. So let's clarify. You have to look at things in the proper way. And the blood samples she gave to Dr. Drown and Chatfield were not her children's blood. They were the blood of a turkey, sheep, and a pig. Now, I don't know. We also have to be careful of the fact that, most animals that are brought up in captivity are not very well. So we don't know. And I don't know if turkeys and sheep and pigs get chicken pox and mumps or have it in it. There are some animals that carry certain viruses all the time with them and are immune to them. There are certain animals that have rabies in them all the time but aren't affected by rabies. There are, I believe, monkeys that carry the AIDS virus, yet it doesn't affect them. So we don't know if that's the case as well. Did these animals potentially have these? Were they ever tested for it? Well, we don't know. And you could say, well, that's stretching. It probably is a wee bit stressing. But it's possible that these types of illnesses, and you're talking about when you're using consciousness radionic equipment, of finding the vibration of what's in that blood. Now, the bottom line is that it is there. Will it manifest? We don't know. It could or could not. Your body could fight off these vibrations so it never manifests. The point is the energy is in you, but you're generating cancer cells all the time. And your body is killing cancer cells and throwing them out of your body. This is a fact. When your body malfunctions and doesn't kill these cancer cells, you start developing cancer. And it can take years as it attacks a weaker organ where it starts to form. So all of that has to be understood, that we're not looking at regular diagnostics here. This isn't a blood test that's going to give you, what your blood fats are, what your other things. Now, you could do that, and I don't know how effective that would be, but that would be something to test so that you can get a blood test and say, well, your cholesterol is 95 per the diagnostic equipment in the lab. What did the radionic person come up with? This is the kind of tests that need to be done, and we'd love to do these as well. Again, we need the De Niro. So the whole idea is that this is what we need to look into. So the whole idea is, and they believe they did the same thing to, which seems to be a way of almost collusion involved. They did the same thing to Albert Abrams. They sent him animal blood instead of human blood. And of course, this is rigging the game as well. You're deliberately setting up something to confuse the practitioner. The same thing that was done by the unamazing Randy to scientists who sent in fakes who weren't expecting fakes. They expected honest people and try and come up with an honest thing. They didn't want to find out, well, why would you possibly come here day after day and trick me? Well, generally people don't do that unless what? Well, unamazing, you paid them, didn't you? But the point is you have to, as a researcher, be cognizant of the fact of what I opened up this talk about. Corruption. Why is someone doing this? Why are they even doing it successful? Why is this person seeming to have psychic powers all of a sudden that has approached you? And why were they picked? So you have to, you always have to be suspicious. So, on the basis of Ms. Mizcat's experience and other evidence, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney John W. Miner and a squad of police and public health inspectors swooped down in the La Brea office building and arrested Drs. Brown and Chatfield and all their assistants. So they arrested everybody. And all assistants, Mrs. Margaret Lumness, again, kind of, I don't know if there's only the three there, and took them into custody. So it's the usual thing. These deadly criminals, they walked in there with, 50 people with machine guns drawn because one of the machine buttons may attack them. Waste of your resources. Certainly with people who are not going to put up a fight. People who put up fights, they don't arrest. And took into custody enough Alice in Wonderland machines, again, the author's prejudice coming out here, to fill a wing in the Smithsonian Institute, which, by the way, is very large. So the point is, we're talking about hundreds of machines, possibly several hundred machines that she had that she was selling to customers. We don't know. It would be nice that if we had some financial data on these people. Dr. Drown died in 1965 while awaiting trial. And as I've mentioned, she lived to be 72 or 3, and there is talk that she was actually injected with something in prison. Dr. Chatfield and Lunnis were convicted of grand theft for their part of the operation, and in 1967 was sentenced. Lunnis being placed on, I don't know, oil probation? I'm not sure of that. On probation for 3 years, and Dr. Chatfield receiving an indeterminate prison term. I don't know what that's all about. They are appealing the conviction. So this is coming back from a newspaper article written at the time. So I'm not... So she was convicted and was going to be sent to prison, but we don't know why. And I'm not sure why that would be. It seems to me that's a fairly strict going on there. The advisors got 3 years probation. Doesn't talk about anything. The case is the doctors Drown and Chatfield had treated 35,000 persons all over the country. Well, this is very interesting because apparently in a time where there was no internet and TV was just kind of kicking in, I guess radio was still going fairly strong, that they somehow reached 35,000 people. And sold their devices to fringe practitioners who have treated an unknown number of patients themselves. So they sold it, of course, to other chiropractors and other doctors. So this 35,000 could easily be 350,000, if not a few million people. Who knows? The devices allegedly could diagnose and cure nearly every known affliction from jealousy to cancer, meaning which, of course, these could be used in the subtle energy way as well. So it always got into kind of metaphysical practices to a degree, but, there's never was a lot of money in that. So people were more interested in treating medical illness. Actually, expert witnesses testified that the elaborate machines, I don't know why they're elaborate, most of Drown's machines weren't on them, that form the basic of Drown treatment are a hoax. She did have several types. In finding the defendants guilty, the judge stated that the theory of treatment is no more valid than voodoo and witchcraft, which, as we all know, is very valid, but that's another story. Drown got some of her ideas from Dr. Albert Abrams and studied with him, actually. So we need to understand that as well. She worked with him as far as I understand, and there is a group there. I do want to note for those interested in some technological is that she used foot plates made from German silver, which is a combination of several metals, and apparently was creating some sort of galvanic skin response, and that the person putting their feet on the plates completed the circuits. And she had 0 through 10 dial knobs, and she used 9 dial devices in general. Basically, Dr. Drown placed an electrode on some portion of the patient's body, usually their abdomen. Of course, this comes from Albert Abrams. This immediately caused a movement on the meter, meaning she was creating a circuit there, was electrical in nature. And as I said, she had this electrical background. She then stroked the rubber membrane while adjusting the 9 dials. And of course, I believe she got this from Delaware, or Delaware took it from her. Apparently, Delaware claims to have had these kind of stick plates. Now, from what I understand, Ruth Drown and Delaware in Great Britain were working together, had contact, and I believe it was George Delaware who copied Ruth Drown's technologies in general, because everything came from the United States, originating with Abrams. This was picked up by a whole bunch of people. Apparently Drown, who was so successful, then started making her own units, and these tend to be just flow-through units, but she had other units, and here we're getting another viewpoint of what she used actually in her office, which was kind of an electronic impedance. what kind of actual flow of energy was going through that person, and she could adjust the dials. It's a very good idea, and there's a whole area of research into, if your cellular energies are so low that you're not going to heal properly. And there's also noted in this article that Abrams' contraptions inspired at least 50 imitations. So 50 other companies started to make these. But she was using this actual electronic circuit to judge the kind of energy flowing through a person. All very valid in understanding subtle energies, etc. And again, the problem is, where is her supporters? I mean, where is your reams of stuff showing this person had this, I cured them, etc.? That's the kind of stuff you bring into court that's irrefutable, as well as lining people up. Now, it's not as simple as that. Juries and people are threatened and bought and other things. So it is a little bit of problems here. That's why I want to try and understand that. So she would go through and she would put rates through there and test their energetic information coming out of that particular rate. Meaning, if she punched in cancer, what did the capacitance through that device show? Using these foot blades, which apparently created some galvanic skin response, and I have not heard this before. And of course, there were other things she used but the main thing was the treatment boxes that she sold people, which were these 9-dial simple flow instruments, and they would give them the rates for their particular problem. I don't know if they gave them a rate book. It doesn't sound like that, but when they had a problem and they came to the doctor, they would give them that and they would take this home. So this was like, getting medicines if you went to your doctor. And of course, in this day and age, $500 worth of medicine is like 2 prescriptions. So it's that's where things have gone to. And of course, you would treat people at a distance for $35 a month, where they would put the person's blood sample in there and send the energy to them. So these are all the things that they did. Ruth Drown also claimed her saints could take photographs of the diseased organs. Now, we know from, and I will get into the other sources here, who worked with Drown, the famous nurse, Francine, excuse me, Francine Farley, who was able to confirm different facts and what was going on. That's why her article, and anyone interested in radionics should really read and reread this many times. I have went over a long, in-depth discussion on this article and her at our Patreon area, which can be accessed by those having Patreon membership. So this is a legitimate third party who is neutral, who's just seeking truth. She wanted to heal people, and that was her mission in life. So her information is very good. Other information, we just don't know. What we do know is that there are, of course, these, when you get into someone's philosophy and what they think, and a lot of these things become a problem and are really based into what's happening in that time, the local prejudices. This is why we have no free will, because society tells us goofy things, and we link it to that because of our personal prejudices. So, she had this photography camera, which I don't know if Delaware took it from her or Delaware started it and then perfected it, and to take these pictures, which she called radio vision. And she would be able to take several, quote, pictures. But the problem with her pictures was that they weren't very clear at all, and you really couldn't tell anything from it. And everyone who witnessed her process said the same thing, particularly Frances Cease, who was a nurse who looked at hers and also went and practiced with George Delaware. And who had his own camera and apparently took excellently clear pictures. Hers did not, and of course she stated that. So it was common knowledge to everybody that these pictures were kind of crappy. So, simple as that. There's other things they point out because she was very metaphysical, apparently believed in Atlantis, wrote a whole book on Atlantis. She felt that this technology, like so many people do, came from an ancient advanced culture in terms of what they were doing, and this was very typical of the information that came from Blavatsky and others. There certainly has been ancient civilizations that go back hundreds of thousands of years that were very advanced, and the fall of these communities, these whole cultures, mankind regressed. And there seems to be certain groups of them that kept knowledge and went around the planet, giving them and slowly building society back up. I don't necessarily think that any of that is overly shocking. But this is, still not considered regular schmientists don't like this. They want to stay with the kind of imbecilic research done with evolution. Evolution research and the Darwin's theories are fraught with all sorts of errors. I mean, it's interesting, makes sense to a degree, but there's so many holes in it that it isn't even funny, including the fact that mankind goes back millions of years. Homo sapiens have been found going back millions of years, not this recent 200,000 where we consider the common Homo sapien. So the actual man goes way back, and this has been proven through many finds, but they're discarded, saying that this doesn't fit into their religion of science. So some of the statements she made, and of course they always ridicule you for this, and they're going to do this with everybody. And I'm not sure why an alternative chiropractor like her would think like a common Methodist or Catholic. You wouldn't even get into this. You stay in that little box, you're not going to get out of it. So it's as simple as that. So you're going to probably believe different things, and how much they believe. Did they believe it as born-again Christians do, that every word is right? But the whole idea she believes in this is not exactly strange. It's only strange when you don't believe in the guttered snipe trash, otherwise known as the holy books of today from all these goofball religions. If you believe in their little comic book fantasies, their virgin births, their rises from the death, and all their little goofball perverted fantasies that you get from all these religions, you're condemned. But if you want to believe in those comic books, you're a hero. So that's the problem. And of course, there are people's personal preference. This goes with the time. People believe in certain things at particular times. There are metaphysical thought forms that go out there. So, crystals are big, herbs are big, this are big. Everybody gets into different things, and that becomes part of the local garbage that goes around. And usually there's a shred of value to it. Because they get her in things like this, and they like to push these things out. Of course, apparently, as I said, the University of Chicago did a big research on her where she showed up and to test her surgery. You have to wonder what kind of insanity, if your system didn't work, that you would go to the University of Chicago and allow yourself to go through all this and show that you were a fraud. And this is one of the problems. Now, Abrams was smart enough not to do this. Now, he either could not reproduce the results that he wanted to, or figured that he was going to somehow be framed. And this framing happens all the time. So let's make that clear. Maybe she was threatened and told you better fail, as I've mentioned. If you think this doesn't happen, you're living in Disneyland. Unfortunately, it costs a lot to live in Disneyland and have them keep you in a fake world. But Dr. Drown had lots of other ideas. I like to put her down. One of them was that jazz music was a cause of cancer. Cancer caused by jazz, she said, could be dissipated by playing such soothing tunes as Carrie Jacobs Bond's Perfect Day. I'm not even sure what that is, but is that a classical music or some sort of stuff? So this, of course, was a prejudice of the 1950s and 60s, where people thought this was the demon music. Now, ultimately, when it gets to a lot of these things, I don't know what jazz means. So I don't know, is that Dixieland jazz? Jazz is one of those terms that everybody uses, but what does it mean? I like jazz, but I don't like some jazz. It's horrific. Other ones is great. So I don't know what jazz means. So I'm not sure what she meant either. Dixieland jazz, great, great sound. But do they actually put off a certain amount of Hertzian energies that are bad for you? Well, this has been talked about many times. Certain Hertzian energies may. But it's hard to believe that this would actually cause problems to any great degree. You know, a lot of these things do affect you, and there can be an awful lot of things that you like and do, foods you eat that you think are pure, that ain't good for you. So, who knows? But this sounds ridiculous, but in an energetic factor, may not be. There may be some types of jazz, and what you listen to, that had disruptive energies in them that may disrupt your bioenergy field. But everything disrupts your bioenergy field. So the minute this stuff is turned off, your body goes back, it repairs itself. Is this something that is a problem? In the bigger picture, as an energy scientist, it makes sense to me to some extent. On the other hand, people think that this is a nonsense. They also like to say it's nonsense that she tells patients not to take showers because the water kind of pulls their magnetic energy off of them, and who are sick, and this isn't good when you take a shower. Well, this could be. We don't know. And it was best to take baths so the energy wasn't running, all the water didn't pick up your bioenergies and move it down. This makes sense to a degree again. That you should take a bath, and that someone else should drain the bath and clean it, because you don't want to be connecting to those toxic energies. Now, energetically, this all makes sense. But of course, in this article, it's, oh, how absurd that is. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Just drink Coca-Cola all the time. It's wonderful for you. Smoke cigarettes. It makes your lungs work better. All doctors say this. And remember, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. No wonder it caught on. So the University of Chicago, which, as I said, reluctantly tested her because of alumni that pushed them to do it, so the university experiment supplied Drown with blood samples, another asked them to diagnose their conditions. Well, it's not too, you have to have a third party do this to begin with. We don't know what they gave her. Were they credible? Did they try and trick her? Did the LA police department come in there and give them false bloods? We don't know. This is why you can't get $1 million prize from a criminal who runs the operation. In one case, after working with her dials for an hour, which sounds absurd because of the fact that she had done this thousands of times, she announced that the patient had cancer of the left breast, which had spread to the ovaries, pancreas, gallbladder, spleen, and kidneys. And again, this may not show up in regular medical tests. And we're talking about this time, I'm not sure if they could have known that. And that she was blind in her right eye, and that her ovaries were not functioning properly. Now, obviously, this last area, or second to last, blind in her right eye, well, that can be easily tested. And of course, she had reduced functioning of other. Well, of course, she has reduced functioning. So, I mean, all of this is something that obviously could be in an energetic form in that person's body. But the patient actually was suffering from tuberculosis of the upper lobe of the right lung. So this probably energetically was affecting her right eye, and of course her kidneys and gallbladders and everything else. But she didn't say that it was that tuberculosis was also part of this diagnosis, which kind of condemns what she did. Now here again, you must understand these readings, and one of the reasons why you have to be very precise when you do any of these. I went to a medical diagnostic woman who used a pendulum. She told me everything I had, which was about 1,000 things. Well, your vitamin C ain't up. I don't care what my vitamins. What's the cause of the main problem here? Couldn't define it. And when you shotgun everything and state everything, well, that's kind of a half-ass way to actually come up with some good hits in terms of the fact, oh yeah, well I told you this wasn't working. Well yeah, but you told me everything else wasn't working either. And this is one of the tricks of particularly prophets who make 1,000 prophecies and then 2 of them come right. Well, of course they're going to come right. I knew a famous guy who made every month he'd say there's going to be a giant earthquake in California. Well, there are earthquakes in California all the time. And if you keep doing that every month, eventually you're going to be right. And of course, then you're going to say, well, those 1,000 wrong, but I got one right, and it was that. Well, that's not real. So this is one of the problems here. So we don't know. Most likely, we don't know if she did have cancer. I don't know if they checked that or not, but the cancer could possibly be causing tuberculosis. We don't know. So these are the type of things, and she spent all this time, came up with that, and there's a long story of what she did in that, and in her testing. She showed her pictures to the university as well, and everybody looked at it. They were just hodgepodge. There's nonsense. There was nothing clear there. You couldn't tell anything from the photographs. These are all part of the problems. And of course, this has been verified by Francine's, who was a nurse who worked with Ruth Drown, who said the same thing, that you couldn't really tell anything from it. So she went ahead and made these unintelligible pictures and gave them to researchers? Well, this is just ridiculous. Did she expect something good to come from this? Was she forced that she had to go there and say, well, if you don't go there, you're going to be obviously show that you're a liar. So she went there anyway, thinking she could bluff them? Was she that delusional? Was she that much of a fraud? I don't know. If you're going to do anything, you have to do like Abrams did, and you just say, okay, yeah, I'll cooperate, but I don't have time right now. But ultimately, you're going to have to prove yourself. In 1951, Dr. Drown was tried on federal charges of introducing a misbranded device into interstate commerce. Now, this is a typical way. Now, every alternative practitioner they did this to. They did this with Dimshaw's color machines, where they actually get you on federal charges like this, and it's very easy to do that. Misbranded is an FDA term of, what the hell is this? It's misbranded because you're saying that it's a device to help when it doesn't. There's no proof it works. And of course, all these things are, there's always pros and cons on this stuff, but we live in a time where we have to have some sort of medical freedom. And you have to, people take their own lives in their hands anyway, and we have to allow for these kind of technologies to be out there, to be tested, but people should be thoroughly briefed and maybe even talk to someone ahead of time saying, hey, look, you got to understand that these things are research-based, and you shouldn't be basing your life on it, or you should be using it in coordination with other treatments. And make sure that people understand that, not in your office, a third party. Because we need to research everything. The problem is we live in a corrupt world, and anything that works is thrown in the trash because the people in control don't own it. So, and if they don't own it, they can't make money on it, and we go on and on and on. So this is what they do. So they misbrand. So if you sell any products, they always say it's misbranded. Now, these things happen to some degrees and not. Some people are closed down or not. Patrick Flanagan with his waters was raided by the FDA a year or two ago, and they weren't really following FDA procedures of selling something. What is it? And so forth. And there's reasons for this. There's a quality control problem. There's labeling something of what it is being correct. And, of course, they had to change things and do different procedures. Now, I have nothing against this. They were not put out of business, but they had to do things in a professional manner because they were actually selling quasi-medical products, even though they weren't labeled that way. But it should be, and they should be following that. Certainly these operations who are selling these little drop bottles of chemicals that cost pennies for $30 or $40 a bottle should definitely put some of their money into following the proper systems. One of them should be, get it out of the plastic bottle, dummies. It's hard to believe someone could put something in a plastic bottle in this day and age for $40. It's insulting. At the trial of the government expert witnesses, Dr. Elmer Belt described the Drown device as perfectly useless. Okay, and this is typical. You're going to get this from any government doctor. You just do not seem to think much of the instrument, do you, Dr. Belt, the defense attorney asked. I couldn't even use it to amuse the children. Dr. Bells replied. Well, that's kind of a snide remark. What does that mean? A lot of children like turning dials. Dr. Drown was found guilty by the jury and was fined $1,000, which to her was nothing. Okay, one of her instruments was $600, so you're talking about 1 1/3 or 3/4 of an instrument to pay her fine. She stopped shipping the devices across state lines, but otherwise carried on business as usual. And this was in 1951, before the big stir that happened in 1966. But of course, that put her on the map. So she went over 10 years. What is that? 14 years. Or is it 15? 15 years until 1966, when there was this raid by the Los Angeles. But it put her on the map, and of course that means they were being watched and finding out what she was doing. So she couldn't ship over interstate because of federal laws. And apparently she didn't. I'm not sure what happened, but the bottom line is that there's usually ways around that. I don't know how that all worked. But the bottom line is that she went on for another 15 years, and this was just a minor bump in the road. But needless to say, of course these didn't make sense electrically. Well, they kind of do, though, because if you put an electrical energy through, regular Hertzian energies, through the system, it will go through the dials and knobs and everything else, but it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't activate anything. So it's important, but there is an element of electricity. But she didn't use electricity. So, in 1966, Dr. Chatfield, her daughter and alumnus, went to trial in Los Angeles on state charges. Okay, these, I guess, were federal charges, which were the easiest ones to go out. In addition to receiving Mrs. Jackie Medcalf's first-hand accounts, that's what we just went through with the animal blood, the court heard witnesses relating astonishing stories. Well, again, here's writers who are using. The court heard a procession, lots of witnesses with astonishing stories. This is, very obviously prejudicially written, and we need to know. It's not written by somebody seeking the truth or know it. One testified that Dr. Drown assured him that his son, a diabetic, could reduce his intakes of insulin prescribed by a doctor if the child took improper writing, took the Drown treatment. Another witness, an epileptic, was told by the doctor that she could cure him. She said that he would be able to stop taking his medication, and she continued to treat him after he had a severe seizure in her office. In another case, a chiropractor who used Drown's therapy interest on a patient brought a man to Drown Laboratories who had growths in his lower intestinal tract. A diagnosis showed no cancer. And the chiropractor, therefore, continued to treat the supposedly benign polyps with the Drown therapy incident. The patient worsened and died. A biopsy done by the medical doctor shown that the growths were indeed cancerous. Now, we don't know how long after that. Maybe at the time, the polyps were not cancerous. But the whole idea is she should have picked that up, and she should have been able to assist that person or, quote, cure it. And these are all things. But what percentage of this? Did her reputation go around pre-internet? How did she get new customers? Was this a typical problem? But of course, when bodies are piling up around you, it doesn't matter if you've had 1,000 good hits. If someone starts to die, this is a serious problem. But of course, doctors get away with this all the time, including murdering people in surgery so they can get new houses and working with criminal agencies that murder people that go into their hospitals. A sad but very true reality out there. Now, there's also a Dr. Moses A. Greenfield, a professor of radiology at UCLA School of Medicine and a consultant to the Atomic Energy Commission, disassembling a Drown device in open court, explained that all of it is basically consistent of a length of wire linking together two pieces of dissimilar metal. Now, I'm assuming this was the actual instrument that she was testing people in her office, not her machines. But here we go, the German silver, which is just a type of composite silver with other metals in it, of the foot plates and the electrodes. The only function performed by the patient was to complete the otherwise broken circuit. So this was a circuit. Again, we're talking about the compedance I talked about. So in his mind, this didn't do anything. Of course, it doesn't do anything in regular medical understanding. And when he did this, a small electrical current between the two metals, when registered, would happen. So we'd get this actual effect because of the fact of you're now connecting there to the body. You're getting this galvanic skin response. And of course, from there, you're going to diagnose. But to this guy, this meant actually nothing. Of course, to regular science, this means nothing. So what? Because they're so successful with all their other treatments. As for the 9 dials with 10 number settings, Dr. Greenfield dismounted the panel and showed that only 2 wires each dial to the only 2 wires of each dial to the circuit. Further dismantling showed that the 10 positions of each switch were connected together, and it therefore made no difference on which position any of the dials were set. Well, I'm not sure what he's saying there. So it looks like were not wired as proper potentiometers should be. So he's saying, but that's not what I've seen from Ruth Drown units. But he's saying that didn't really even matter. And I'm not sure it does matter if we get into this pure psychic tuning tool, which a lot of these units are. And of course, William Bankston, the famous researcher, has shown that by using hands-on and psychic practices, that he's able to cure people, and been doing that for 30 years in the lab, curing mice and so forth. So this is all part of the entire process. The exposure of the scientific fraud brought some moments of amusement to the courtroom, but behind it all lay epic example of heartless, cruel indifference to human life. Quackery can kill, said District Attorney John Miner in his summary, and the use of fraudulent instruments such as these in the courtroom is dangerous to human life. The Drown Chatfield scheme, which treated thousands of patients and took in immense sums of money for years after its worthlessness that has been demonstrated in the Chicago experiments and the federal trial demonstrates that the nation is far from solving one of its greatest social problems, the menace of health fraud. So that's what, of course, the district attorney at the trial said. And, of course, we could not expect anything less. And it's sad that she could not bring forward, apparently, people she cured. I don't know if maybe they didn't allow it. Because you got to remember, you can't bring anybody into court that you want to. The judge has to say, well, you can do that. So the point is that there's all sorts of things that are allowed and not allowed. Were people allowed to bring in what was going on at this trial, et cetera, et cetera? We just don't know. No. Needless to say, her failure at the University of Chicago is appalling. Whatever she wired in her instruments and everything else, we just don't know if there's any validity to it. That's what we're trying to prove here at IGOS. Well, what is that? We want to get these machines. We want to find out. What is that? People working in this area today are controlled by not being allowed to speak about their work because of the fact. Now, we're starting a whole investigation in this with different radionic practitioners, particularly in England, that we're trying to contact and find out, well, what is your success rate? And we will keep you anonymous, but we want to talk about the fact of what you were able to do and how you were able to do it. So, using what instruments, what were you doing, how long did it take? I mean, getting into some real facts. Now, there's only one book that discussed this called Radionic, I'm trying to remember the title, Radionic Healing or Healing with Radionics or something like that, which was printed in the 1980s, which went into cases of people being healed with radionics using all sorts of things, including absurdly, I think at the end they were using some sort of cowbells, which kind of pushes past the fact that the instrument means anything. It gets back into the William Bankston understanding of hands-on healing and healing in general, where you're using a higher energy that you just kind of connect into casually, because you don't want to concentrate on it because you interrupt it. So this is a whole other story. So I always recommend to anybody, William Bankston, who has the book called The Energy Cure and a website. So people interested in healing should check that out. He is advanced fairly well, and there are things that he can help with. So these are the type of things that come up and cause great. And as I said, this is just kind of a quick overview of the whole situation, because these things are not, nothing is straightforward. Everything is very difficult. It's hard to find information. As we get further and further involved in all this stuff, it becomes a serious problem of finding the facts. And of course, you need people to go out there and actually do this and to do the deep research. What's the story here? Now, I'm not sure anything can be found further on Ruth Drown. What's on Ruth Drown is she has left her statements in her books. There is no patient records or anything else that I'm aware of, even though she still has family. I believe she had a son who is an actual medical doctor. I'm assuming he's still alive. But nobody's going to talk here. I mean, after all, these people were persecuted horribly, and nobody's very interested in it. So I'm not sure what any of that means to the finding. But certainly De La Warr, who's connected with the Radionic Institute, has left years and years of newsletters, and I'm assuming other information there can be followed better. But it's not something that someone's come out and put their head on the chopping block. The Radionic Association, etc., isn't coming out and stating how valid all this stuff is. They do their thing, and maybe wisely. They do their little thing, run their courses, have their practitioners, and we're this little segment. We're not going to put our head on the chopping block. So I certainly understand this in the bigger picture that goes on with all this. So I think we all need to understand that. But again, there is a problem believing in something that is not valid. And how well does it work? Well, how does well, if anything, work? And my conclusion in life has it, all my research, is that you can find the complete opposite of everything you research. So if you find that something is wonderful for you, and let's take an instance of something that everybody knows here. Garlic. Now, your first reaction to garlic is, from what you've been told and with the many supplements that are put out there and the fact that it's used in culinary situations, that it is, certainly it's a great seasoning. And of course, it's been used medicinally in many cultures for long periods of time and is considered to be used now. Well, garlic to the human body is a poison. And the point is, that's maybe the reason it works. Your body is taking a poison in and creating a lot of antibodies or reactions that may be helping a process of the body. Maybe that helps draw poisons out of you, other poisons, and you kick it out. We don't know. But it has also been thought, and I haven't tried it out, but the point is that has been known from intelligence agencies, spy types, that you stick a pin in garlic, and then you take that pin and stick it into somebody else and get it directly into their blood, and it kills them. It also shows very disruptive patterns. You take a lot of garlic and it messes up your thought patterns. It hurts all your psychic powers. It's having great effects on your brain. And this has been known through ancient mystical groups, particularly in India and other places, that tell people to stay away from all these garlics, onions, all these things that stimulate, and you may like the taste. I personally do as well. But this disrupts your whole energetic body. Now, it may disrupt the body for a period of time that it helps you heal. This is how a lot of homeopathic preparations work. You'll take poisons. These poisons cause you to, your body functions to react in a certain non-dangerous way. And what happens is that you are able to, your body produces certain chemicals to fight the poisons. So this is very interesting and, of course, very effective to your body. Then raises your heartbeat, will produce higher levels of heat and so forth. This will burn out what the problems are in your system because it's fighting the poison. And it'll do this on a very low level, so you don't see much of reaction. That's what homeopathy, in kind of a nutshell, is all about. Or you're taking in just the vibrational energy from the homeopathic, so you're not getting these kind of toxins. And the same thing with using it as kind of a supplement or empowering. You're only taking in energy. No physicality is there. So all of this has to be understood in the entire process of what's going on. So her case and everything there is pretty much laid out. So people understand what is happening with Ruth. So there's a lot there to be found. So we just don't understand. I find it very but of course maybe she was forced to go to the University of Chicago because everybody's, look, we've got this, we have all these people set up, we know them at the university. Here's your chance to shine. And she failed because her system wasn't very good. Certainly that's what it appeared to be. The same thing happened with Albert Abrams. Second, he didn't do it himself personally, but someone supposedly that was high in his organization, which he then denied later, ran into similar problems of not being able to do this, which would be considered pretty simplistic stuff. The misdiagnosis, which are not quite understood, that you're picking up possible future vibrations. All of this is not understood, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be defining what is happening now. And this is a big cop-out for alternative practitioners who may be working with interesting and potent technologies, but really aren't applying them correctly or have any guidance. This is very typical as well. They're not trained well. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, you can see that with radionic manufacturers today. They're building very poor tools. They're not functioning the way they should. They really have no understanding of how to use them. They have no backgrounds in electronics, just to even understand basic electronics. And they have no understanding of energy flow, etc. And that's, of course, what we're talking about here. So these are the kind of people that tend to go to prominence and try and make money off of it, and the ones that ultimately have their equipment tested, which tend to fail. And I find this all the time. I test people and they fail and fail and fail. I mean, they also have absolutely no background training. They don't seek out things. They know something at one particular level, and they're never training themselves further, unlike IGOS, who's always seeking more information and trying to do things better, create more potent technologies, and always learning. Most people aren't. Where's the dough is what they're saying. So they may be sincere on one level, but they also have to survive. The other thing is they have to be careful what they do because of the realities out there. And to a certain amount, that's right. If you're very sick and you're going to depend upon an unknown, unproven technology, well, that's not too smart. On the other hand, is allopathic regular medicine proven? Well, we know that we have almost a 99% failure rate, and they've kept records of that, of people that die from all these regular treatments. So again, this is all the rub, and what do we do about it? As with all of life, what does it come down to? Well, it comes down to, again, of the seeking of truth, something that I don't know if society has ever tried to do. People seek truth, whether it's through Scientology, through ancient mystical systems and religion, and what they find out when they get into it and are immersed into it and spend huge amounts of their time, money, etc., that these are empty vessels. And when they get to the bottom of that vessel, all they hear is the ring of its emptiness, not the tone of fulfillment. So this is a problem, and people do not have the courage to say that this is empty, this is wrong. They then try and justify it and lie about it, as all these religions have done. And belief systems, including the religion of science, which is another empty vessel, as is Mormonism and other things. When you come down to it, it's a bunch of contrived stories with nothing really to connect it. And that's because we never seek truth, and we're not at the point to say, hey, look, we got to the bottom of this, it's disappointing, but now it's time to find truth. Society doesn't work on that. You now spent your time and your money here, and now you want to make sure it works because this is what you are built upon. And there's an ego factor, if not a money factor. Albert Einstein ran into this where he knew all of his theories were wrong, yet to his dying day wanted to push his belief systems. Instead of saying, hey, look, well, there is credibility to this. Let's not jump into it. But yes, I was probably wrong here. Now let's seek the truth and let me put my energy there. No one does this. So we run around into this same kind of nonsense in this circle here of trying to verify your ego and keep your standard of living up to survive. Well, these are motivating factors that are extremely high. You then have a society structure that just wants to support the status quo. They have the money, they have the industrial complex to support them, the politicians, the law enforcement, all these people are there to support the status quo. And if you go against them, as the employees of the Ford Motor Company found out when they protested down the streets, that the police brought in tanks to control them, and people were murdered and killed at these different things. So the whole idea is this is not unusual. So this is the kind of world we live in, a corrupt, stinking world. And if we're going to change anything, we need to stop corruption. We also need to be in areas that are critical, which is human health, which affects the way we think. Because if your body is sick, your mind is sick. And if your mind is sick, your body is sick. This is a human crisis, a human right where people are suffering and we need to find answers. And the answers can't cost millions and millions of dollars, which ultimately fail. If you get a cancer treatment that you may live a year or two more, and none of this has been documented very well, and it costs millions of dollars, who's going to pick that up? Who's going to pay for that? Now, you may think that year, because it is your life, is extremely valuable. Well, maybe it is, and we have to figure out how to do these things cost effective, because life is about cost. What is cost effective? Well, cost effective is like using psychics to do military intelligence that cost a few $1 million instead of buying one tank for $10 million. So, if they're that cheap, by the way. So the whole idea is that these things need to be researched, looked at, used, and perfected because of their low cost and their high rate of success. And that has to be proven or disproven by people who are neutral, not controlled monkeys who do what their superiors tell them to do. So here we go back to the same old story. But this is with everything. What's the best of anything? What are the best belief systems? What are the best of anything out there? Well, the best of anything out there is what is basically marketed the best. And you're going to buy what's marketed the best. And some of that's not your fault. Well, how are you supposed to buy something if you never know about it? So it's as simple as that. You have to get to the point that you understand the process going on. People refuse to support anything that isn't, quote, popular. Well, did you do this? I did this. Oh, let's get it. So let's all get together as one group of incompetent idiots and keep supporting all the stuff that doesn't work. So this is how the world works. Now, is this ever going to change? No, it's never going to change. It never will. It never has. And that's the way life is. So some people come along and try and do things. Some of them are sincere when they start off. Some of them get good results. We don't know. Why wouldn't you, as a doctor who is under attack, keep very great records? I mean, here Ruth Drown had 15 years before she was persecuted by the local authorities, which I'm assuming were after her for a long time. But she had 15 years to put together information to protect herself, and apparently lots of money. And usually that's a factor. If you're a small, struggling person, well, it's very difficult to do things. But 15 years with lots of money, she couldn't put together all these cases where she was helping people. She couldn't perfect her photography. Well, none of this apparently was done. And as I said, we have a third party who is sympathetic, which is generally what you want without being corrupt, to the radionic cause, which is the radionic nurse Francine's, which, as I mentioned, I have a couple of reports on and a long discussion of her and what she wrote on Patreons. So the whole idea is that we know that she didn't take good pictures. Why did she possibly do that and was not able to perfect it, but wanted this kind of glorified and goofy technology she could show other people to impress them. Yet apparently, George de la Warr was able to make clear pictures of organs, etc. So there should have been more time spent working together there. So here we go again. There doesn't seem to be. And I don't know what Dr. Abrams was coming up with, what his statistical data was, but apparently, and of course they want to muddy the field by saying how much money everybody makes, but of course, regular therapies in the United States, these doctors are making millions and millions of dollars. And most people are not benefiting from it. What are we supposed to do with all that? So this is not a case of only these kind of hillbilly frauds and gypsies going out and stealing from people. The regular medical establishment is stealing from people all the time, and they're getting nothing back from it. This is horrendous. But as I said, nothing will change. We need to seek truth. Does it work or does it not? What is the value of it? Nobody is doing that but IGOS. So if you expect to get the answers to these, which are critical to save your life, your family life, and the whole society in general, well, you're going to have to start getting out there and supporting those people who are really trying to make a difference. And that is IGOS. Nobody else is doing it. Nobody else has spent 50 years like myself studying these areas in a proper way of looking at it, seeking truth, not seeking religion, not buying into one particular device or technology, even if I make it myself. I want to get into what works the best, and that's why I keep producing new products and so forth, because the inferior garbage out there from the uneducated goofballs that are putting all sorts of products and courses out there are not assisting the process. As a matter of fact, I believe all these people, and have proof of it with many of them, that they are nothing more than shills for criminals that want to make sure that you are disempowered by using garbage technology that doesn't work for you. Well, that's the facts, people. I hope you've enjoyed this. A fascinating look with a fair amount of so-called data. We don't even know if these reports that are written about online are correctly written. The authors are very prejudiced. We'd have to get the original reports from the universities and look at the court cases and everything else. But let's assume they're ballparky correct, meaning they're kind of right. Well, we have to look further into it. We have to find out what the truth is. And it's hard to believe that these people couldn't march up treating 35,000 people. They couldn't, even based on the placebo effect, march up a bunch of people that claim they were cured. Well, maybe they weren't allowed to. We don't know. Okay, until next time.